welcome to our first ever Conceived in Liberty, the Bradley Speaker Series. I'm Rick Graber, president of the Bradley Foundation, and on behalf of our Bradley team and our board of directors, thank you for joining us, and we hope that you and your families are safe and healthy. You know, about this time every year, we're getting ready for our Bradley Prizes celebration, which is just a wonderful event held in Washington, D.C. each year, which honors and celebrates the accomplishments of three outstanding individuals who have really dedicated their lives and their careers to restoring, strengthening, and protecting the principles and institutions that have made this country unique and exceptional. Obviously, we can't do that this year, but we thought it'd be fun and interesting to host a series of conversations with former Bradley Prize winners. And I can't think of a better person to start with than our Bradley Prizes Master of Ceremonies and former Bradley Prize winner, Kim Strassel. Kim, as all of you I'm sure know, is a very well-known author and columnist. I probably speak for everyone that's viewing this that I can't wait for Fridays to read Potomac Watch to hear what you have to say each and every week. So Kim, welcome and greetings.
Well, Rick, thank you. That's such a kind introduction, and I am so sad that we're not all meeting for the Bradley Prizes this year, but this is a great idea, totally within the spirit of all of us continuing to think about some big thoughts as we get through this moment.
Absolutely. Let's just jump right in and let's talk a little bit about your views on what you think the role of government should be during a national emergency. So in your view, does the government have a role in bolstering an economy during times such as this? And talk a little bit about what's the appropriate role, what's a rational response, and at the same time, what's an overreach?
Well, first of all, I think that one of the silver linings of this pandemic, and there haven't been many, but it's given us a new reason to think hard about federalism and the role of federal governments versus state governments. And we're seeing that play out on a national basis. And look, I think generally that balance was struck, and that what the federal government decided to do from the beginning, and all credit to Vice President Mike Pence, who took the lead here, was to offer a supporting role to the states. Leave it largely to them to decide what kind of shutdowns they were going to implement, how they would handle this, but to stand ready to help with ventilators, medical supplies. Also, to take the lead, which I think is immensely important, and saying from the start that this was going to be a public-private partnership, and aggressively reaching out to the private sector, which has always been the strength of our country and the center of its innovation. In terms of overreach, we're just now beginning to get some of those questions being asked. I think governors, when they initially went into the shutdowns, were doing so on the best evidence that they had. None of us really understood how this was working in the beginning. But as they drag on, there are now questions about whether or not this is indeed too much. We're beginning to have lawsuits about the lockdown on businesses and orders to stay home. The Department of Justice is intervening in some of those. And that's the scary part of this pandemic, is it offers the opportunity for overzealous leaders to exceed their authorities and in ways that I think are profoundly disturbing.
Let's drill down a little bit more on the private enterprise comment that you made there. You said in a recent column, to the extent America is weathering this moment, it is in enormous part thanks to the strength, ingenuity, and flexibility of our thriving, competitive capitalist players. Should the government be doing more to unleash the power of the private sector? And, I would include not only business, but private not-for-profit groups that are making such a difference during a time such as this.
Absolutely. They need to be doing much more. And again, look, I give government credit for doing what it has been able to do. But let's remember, this is government. This is the same government that brings you the DMV. Okay, and so expecting it to suddenly be the answer and the be all end all in the moment of a crisis is absolutely ludicrous. The people, the players, the actors in this country that remain, again, its source of its innovation, of its productivity, have always been in the private sector and nonprofit sectors, who are tackling really hard questions. So to the extent, look, I think one of the major problems the federal government has made has been being captive to too few voices when it came to this. And I think we're going to look back and decide that, having one team of professionals who just happened to be the team of professionals that were there when this moment hit maybe wasn't the best idea. We should have been reaching out to voices in the academic sector and the nonprofit sector, experts in various fields, to have got their views on lockdowns and ways to handle this medically as well too. But it's never too late, and we need to be not just relying on the private sector, but studiously looking at how we move regulations out of their way, in a way that's safe, but in a way that also allows them to respond to this even faster than they have so far.
What do you think we've learned about our democracy over the last 3 months, and what challenges do you see that lie ahead from a constitutional perspective? What principles do you think should be guiding us in the coming months?
Well, look, I think on the upside, the first thing that we've been reminded is about the extraordinary spirit of this country. And, I talked about the private actors who have been engaged, but millions of individual Americans, working on sending masks to different healthcare providers and helping out their neighbors who couldn't leave their homes, and figuring out how to, on the fly, homeschool their children. And, with the resilience of this country was once again on display. And that is something that I just celebrate. But, in terms of basic principles, one thing that really struck me, Attorney General Bill Barr recently said, is just because you're in a pandemic, it doesn't mean the Constitution goes on holiday, and that includes the Bill of Rights. And I think that that's a very wise point. Well, you had Americans that in the beginning tried very hard to follow these rules because they believed that they'd been set out with the best interests of public health and at heart. But we are being reminded of the importance of religious liberty. For instance, when you have this lawsuit in Virginia for a church that got in trouble for simply having, I think, a mere 16 parishioners gather on Easter. The Department of Justice has intervened in that. Again, we're seeing the questions of federalism and what should the states be doing versus what is the federal government. Freedom of speech. That's a really important one to me. It's not that anyone has actually come out and said you can't publish it, although we have had a few examples of that. But this idea that if somehow you question the public scientists, if you question the wisdom of government, that you are a COVID-19 denier, we're seeing that word. So these are all principles we need to remember are vital. And we need to be hearing all voices. The more we do, the quicker and better we'll come out of this.
You're part of the media. We watch these briefings every single day. We watch how the media is handling this. How, in your view, should the media be handling this, and how should the president be responding?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think the media gets most of it gets a flat out F for its coverage in this, because again, the media exists to question conventional wisdom, all right, and to push back on the narratives that you get from established figures. Their interest in this has not been in asking those tough questions, not to ask if we are pursuing the right policy, but rather to take the opposite view of anything that Donald Trump says, because it continues along in their general disdain for him as a president. That's not serving the public the right way. I think that we may have, and also too, I think there's been a certain amount of fear mongering. We unfortunately live in, 24-hour cable news headlines, and all the numbers about how bad things were, and more sort of scary stories every day. It wasn't necessarily in the service of information. It was in the service of more clicks and more viewers. And that's a very delicate balance the media has to handle, but one that ought to be their top priority.
It's going to be fascinating to watch how different states approach this. We've heard some governors say that the Bill of Rights are above their pay grade, which is amazing in and of itself, but it'll be fascinating to see what happens in Georgia and Texas and other places that are starting to open up and really trying to do both.
Well, and again, another amazing strength of this country is that we have 50 laboratories of democracy, and they are all out there right now, engaging in their own way forward on this. And we're going to learn a lot from it. Okay. And some people are going to make mistakes. Some people are going to do it better than others. We need to have a tolerance and an understanding of that. But hopefully we do come out of this with a far better sense of, look, if this roars back in the fall, this is a crucial moment for us. What lessons do we take out of what we've just done over the past 2 months? And how do we handle it again a couple of months from now if it comes back? We're seeing some very fascinating data come in from other countries. For instance, Sweden, I think posing very serious questions, and also from certain states in the United States that never locked down at all. And their curves are not necessarily that much worse than those who did total shutdowns. So how do we manage this and balance it?
Great. Kim, thanks so much for spending a little time with us. Again, we're sorry we won't see you at this year's Bradley Prizes, but we'll see you at next year's Bradley Prizes, which will be a terrific event honoring 3 outstanding individuals. We hope you've enjoyed this first Conceived in Liberty, the Bradley Speaker Series. Our next conversation will be with Professor and Historian Alan Gelzo. We look forward to seeing you then. Thanks so much.